Good morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome to this webinar from World Habitat this morning. My name's Ella Hancock. I'm the Programme Manager for the Homelessness Programme at World Habitat. So today we're launching a new study commissioned by World Habitat and completed by the Metropolitan Research Institute and the Budapest Institute, and that explores the main barriers and challenges and opportunities of implementing a housing-led approach in the Central and Eastern European region. So today we're going to share some of the main findings and the recommendations, but we're also going to consider why this is necessary, why now is the time, and what we can learn from existing practice. So we will hear from the researchers and the Housing First Europe Hub, but we will also hear from practitioners that are already delivering housing-led work in the region.
My name's David Ireland, Chief Executive of World Habitat, and what I suppose I'm going to be brief, but what I really wanted to talk to you about is sometimes you need to challenge the consensus to get anywhere, and I think that's really what I see in this report and this piece of work. So World Habitat's vision is about housing justice, so finding out what works and helping it grow to become mainstream housing practice. And we've been doing this for getting on for 50 years, and ending homelessness has been a recurring theme. And, you know, perhaps that's not surprising. You can't have housing justice when there are still people living on the street and there are still people who are homeless. What is stark is for me is for most of those 50 years, if you look, the consensus on homelessness is in a sense been the wrong way round. You know, what is cause and what is effect? And that consensus and the assumption that many people make is that people become homeless because of the social problems that they experience, whether that's mental health, addictions, whatever. But what if for many people, it's the experience of homelessness that causes them to become unwell? And the evidence suggests that it is. Once you follow that logic, it kind of becomes inescapable that to end homelessness, you have to approach it that way too. And that's where the term housing-led comes in. If you can help people to sort out their own housing needs first, then and only then it becomes possible to overcome health and other social problems that they may be experiencing. And we know it works. In fact, in those sort of 50 odd years of visiting and reviewing homelessness programs around the world, we've seen it's the only thing that works. And I've seen it myself in many places around the world, probably none more dramatic than in Finland. And most people know about the extraordinary work that has been done there. But also in Fianza and Abbé Pierre's 8th overview of housing exclusion in Europe, it shows that homelessness was rising everywhere across Europe, with the exception of the 2 countries which have strategies to combat homelessness, which are based on a housing-led approach. So Finland being one of those and Denmark being the other. And I think it's this sort of sense is why 8 years ago we set up the European End Street Homelessness Campaign. And we work in 9 countries and many cities, helping them towards a target of ending street homelessness. In 2022, we started working more closely with our 4 partners from Central and Eastern Europe. Some regions, and Central and Eastern Europe being one of these, has made slower progress in adopting housing-led solutions, and that is what has prompted us to commission this study. So what we're launching today is Ending Street Homelessness in Central and Eastern Europe, making the shift to a housing-led system. It's a report and policy brief which has been completed for World Habitat by the Metropolitan Research Institute and the Budapest Institute. And our aim with this research and its recommendations is that they will be a catalyst for positive change in the region. And we will work collaboratively with our partners in the region who are all dedicated to ending homelessness. So we don't underestimate the scale of this task. It's a big challenge, but we believe that this report and challenging the consensus together, it is a start to ending street homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks a lot for giving us the opportunity to present some major findings of this report. but much more for connecting us with these wonderful four partners with whom you have been collaborating, actually fighting that in various fields of their activities, some of which we were not yet in contact with. So we with Balázs are basically now representing a pretty large group of researchers who are just behind all these findings that we're going to share now with you. Our main message here is that things can be done, but they have to be done sometimes differently in the Central East European region than elsewhere. And why this is necessary, this is what this presentation is all about. And I think many, many details are there in the reports, and more specifically in the country briefs that Ella is going to point out later on here in this meeting. And we're also very glad that these country briefs are not just available in English, but they are also accessible for the national readership and audience in the national languages in these four countries. So, so we took the task to do an overview of what's there in our countries, but with a very specific goal of showing of what are those key factors that are essential for a change to move towards housing-led approaches from what we have been witnessing since the transition in these four countries. Into details we're going to come a bit later. And while doing so, we also wanted to show which components are yet there in these countries based on which progress can be made. Very concrete, sometimes even technical factors that are essential and that are already present across these countries. Of course, we identified a number of challenges that are all over there. We, in the last 3 decades, have gone through all economic changes and also demographic changes, changing structures with economies, meaning transformation of job markets, and also location-wise changes of hubs where development is there, and also backward falling regions. There's a country, Romania, where 1/10 of the population has left the country. In other places, migration to other European member states are more temporary, but still affect a lot of the housing markets, for example, and also housing quality. What we also have seen, and this is what is this graph on the figure on the right-hand side, is that the tenure structures across these countries essentially include a risk component for many who cannot access home ownership, because most of these countries are super home ownership countries, as housing researchers we would put it, where close to 90% or over 90% of people live in the housing they own, and a large proportion owns this housing even outright. So accessing new homes for people who don't have financial means is really difficult, because the proportion of dwellings that you can access, for example, when you want to rent, is really small. Private market is very expensive with rising prices, and the social landlords like municipalities, or sometimes also other cooperatives, they are only controlling a very small share of the housing, where you have long waiting lists or even local connection rules. So it is really uneasy for people to get housing in that particular segment. We've also witnessed that in these 30 years, many, many little programs have been launched, but also larger ones, which would largely target credit programs, so credit support programs, essentially targeting those who are better off. So again, the most vulnerable remain left out from a range of programs, and therefore it contributes to vulnerabilities and more exclusion. And even if there were social housing programs, there were quite a few, for example, in Slovakia, with many lessons learned, there is much volatility. So what happens for 3-5 years, it will be then stopped, and you cannot really plan long-term, like a local housing strategy to be implemented is really difficult. But that's also true for the national levels, where national housing strategies are essentially lacking. And obviously, homelessness strategies are also just developing, if at all, across these countries. So to make it brief, affordable housing programs that would be a component in shifts towards housing-led approaches across the region, they're really small and also short-term. Of course, we've also looked into the situation of homelessness, and there it's even less what we can talk about in terms of having very clear pictures of how homelessness emerges, and that's of course, like, there's more data on that, but how exits from homelessness are possible across these 4 countries. We've realized, and this is a commonplace for most of our audience, that in these 4 countries, quite similarly to many other EU countries, crisis intervention services play the most dominant role. There's lack of prevention, to which Balázs is going to come back. But we've also seen that there are very useful and very clever local initiatives, some of which are going to present it also later on. But these are mostly loosely connected with national frameworks, be it the general welfare arrangements and policies or housing policies. Thus, whatever is implemented and is being launched, it remains isolated, and it is very uneasy to make them sustained on the long run. And this is also made obvious because there's scarce funding from national budgets beyond the emergency services and also for emergency approaches, which means that the quality of service delivery is also pretty problematic in a couple of countries. But what we also learned, and this is quite one of the things where we can really build a lot of lessons from and then put them forward for future policy recommendations, that the EU funds have been playing a strong lever role in changes, in changing approaches, in changing methods, changing the perspective how homelessness is being dealt with. So in most of the examples that we've been drawing upon, and then quoting also in the report, they are in one way or another connected with EU co-funded initiatives. So what's the lessons learned? So where do we start from at this moment? Is that we could see that those initiatives that have been useful and those who adhere to housing-led philosophies, that they do address structural challenges. They start small, but there are components that make it easy to be scaled up. But these changes have to be planned on the long run because there's a combination of those factors that have to play together to facilitate this particular change. So the initiatives, technically, little programs, they have to go hand in hand with advocacy, with a lot of knowledge sharing and a lot of cooperation. Because as we can see, essentially, services across the countries in components are present, but the coordination and a better targeting will be needed to facilitate progress. What we can also see is that there is a very strong European level framework to facilitate this progress. So the 2030 goals and targets to end homelessness, whereas it seems a very ambitious goal, but it offers tools also to hook on when we want to facilitate this change. So the EU platform as such is a useful facilitator for our targets in this sense. But this is sometimes quite a distant level in policy terms. And we find that local authorities are key drivers. All initiatives that have been played out to serve actually the needs and also to deliver longer term results are done in cooperation with local authorities because they are essentially there then to sustain services and also contribute to housing stock. But Balázs will talk about that a bit later. What we've also learned from the partners with whom we work together, some of whom are present here and some of whom are Yoki partners, within this process is that the pooling of expertise is necessary, because some of this knowledge is there, but some of this will need to be actually added up and complemented by others in networks that have to be still fostered. And whereas I'm very happy that David started out emphasizing the approach of World Habitat, we are very much in agreement. There is a necessary shift in narratives that we have to facilitate. The criminalization of homelessness, of various components attached to what people experiencing homelessness face in their everyday lives is a key that has to be tackled. Negative stereotypes, based on promoting evidence-based and effective solutions in combination with addressing that particular policy barrier is a very much, so we cannot underestimate the importance of that particular essential and basic framework. And what we've also seen, and this is a lesson across all 4 countries, but we also have a couple of more, of course, from the European context, is that there is a component of policy innovation that is essential to give more impetus to change. So we need to address what is there in terms of the housing sector and the housing systems challenges. So we need to address issues that are essentially there in housing inequalities, to enable drawing on the private rental market, which is, of course, a prerequisite for providing more supply, and for that supportive regulatory frameworks and practical solutions are needed to have at hand. So that's from my side, and now Balázs, it's your turn, please.
So thank you. I join Nóra in saying that this was a very interesting and very important exercise, and it was a pleasure to participate in it. I will stress 2 issues in special, which I think are important in terms of policy contribution, and then highlight a few recommendations, way less than what is included in the report itself. So one thing is housing stock. Right? So while the individual countries have different stories, it is clear that housing-led efforts need housing. And local governments can do, and national governments as well, we found that can do things to make more housing available. This might take different forms. It might be dilapidated homes. It might be renovating homes. It might be stopping privatization efforts that come from other considerations. And it also includes leveraging privately owned vacant homes, which is an issue that's very much there in countries where owners often out-migrate into the west of Europe, where investment considerations enter the picture. Local governments can enter the field of social rental agency and setting up social rental agencies and being a productive middleman between renters and owners who might trust the local government and its agency, and that might also add to additional housing sectors. This is a mixed exercise. The elements might be different in different countries, even different municipalities, but there is a lot that can be done. We have observed initiatives where one or the other of these elements work quite well. Nóra, can you step to the next slide, please? Okay, so the other thing is prevention. We have found that in these countries, preventive services are quite underdeveloped. And while this might be beyond the comfort zone of our NGO partners, or World Habitat's NGO partners, this is a point at which a lot can be done against homelessness. So institutions where homelessness emerges, from prisons to mental health institutions to state orphanages, could do way more in preventing many of those people emerging from those institutions or situations like divorce to end up homeless, right? So this is an important policy insight that all these countries share, and that a lot can be done, mostly by governments. And this takes us to the last slide. Our time is almost up. We have quite a few recommendations for different actors. So these are just highlights. They are also somewhat different across countries, especially for national governments, right? In countries where homelessness is illegal, one of our recommendations is to maybe make it not illegal, right? But these are the common pool of recommendations that we think make sense in all of those four settings. So just to point out a few considerations. One is that international funding and advocacy organizations, in addition to funding and evaluating, which is very important to actually get evidence, right? And something to disseminate and show others housing-led projects. They can also provide technical assistance and share knowledge across practitioners. And often there is a big value added coming from financing efforts that are beyond the core activity of the NGOs that are flooded with challenges in terms of homelessness, right? Like long-term advocacy, like effective networking, like setting up partnership with other agencies, right? This requires resources, and it's important that international agencies that help also think of this when they help local NGOs that are active in this field. For the NGOs themselves, we have a long list of recommendations. Let me just highlight something that follows from what I mentioned earlier, that they should, in addition to their core activity, also advocate for better regulation. Also, there is room for training staff in addition to working in the field and to learn new methods, right? NGOs know this, but under the terrible pressures of trying to help their clients, this might lose its priority in their activities, and we think that's an important one, and it's important to point out to them that there is this is as important as getting their core work done, and sometimes separating housing services from the social work aspects might also help. Municipalities are a key stakeholder in this story, right? We have found that even in countries, within countries, there is a big variety of how similar sized local governments approach and address homelessness, right? So this suggests that in many municipalities, way more can be done than what is done now. And what we suggest for them to do is in line with what we stressed earlier. They can do way more to expand social housing, to initiate social rental agencies or joint social rental agencies, and to either themselves or provide housing and the rent allowance schemes, or to lobby for nationwide such schemes. Right, national governments had better act on the Lisbon Agreement, right? That addresses what they can and should be doing. There is, in addition to individual efforts, it helps a lot if there are national homelessness strategies, right, that bring the different elements together, including what I stressed earlier, prevention, right? Also changing regulatory arrangements that affect other areas as well, but have a big effect on homelessness. And they should provide housing, right? Provide funding for housing, right? I mean, they have the money, right? Not just them, but they do have the money. And finally, the EU could the EU is a major, and this is something that Nóra mentioned, the EU is a major player in the policy, in affecting policy in these relatively poorer member states of the EU, right? They are all recipients of structural funds, right? So they had better listen to what the EU says, right? So the EU might say things that help in this field, right? One important point is the country-specific recommendations, right? Annually, the EU tells these countries what they should do in terms of policy fields, right? This is not obligatory, but it does matter. And the EU could stress these issues that we have been discussing here. And the EU can also do a lot in monitoring that funds are spent well. And they can also help in improving policy design. And there is a lot of room for improvement there. And I stop here and thank you for your patience and interest. And of course, Nóra and I are happy to answer questions.
So thank you, Ella. I would really like to start this presentation thanking you and thanking World Habitat for doing this great feasibility study, and say congrats to all the authors. I think this is a very special moment to do this. I think there is a lot of room for progress in Central and Eastern Europe, and I would like to start this presentation reminding of this number we just knew through the 8th overview of housing exclusion Europe 2023, a report made by Fondation Abbé Pierre and Fianza. It's 895,000 people homeless in Europe, means 30% more than in 2019. I think this is a number that should make us all think about the importance of the challenge we are facing. We are today talking about Central and Eastern Europe, but I think it's important to understand that this is a common issue, and everyone in Europe, we are facing the same issue, and this is the moment. And why do I think this is the moment? Because first of all, we have this Lisbon Declaration from 2021, where all the member states sign up for this very specific challenge to end homelessness by 2030. Also, in that declaration, this European platform on combating homelessness was created. So we could see by then that there is a strong political will on the European context to put homelessness on the agenda and fight it and tackle it and try to end it by 2030. And also, we have to consider one more thing. On the second half of 2024, we will have in the European Union this presidency by Hungary. So we'll see what happens, but it's clear that this is a crucial moment, and it's the right time to to understand how the dynamics in Central and Eastern Europe goes in terms of facing homelessness. So, as Ella Hancock said, I work for the Housing First Europe Hub and wanted to talk about a little bit about Housing First and why Housing First, as one of the main housing-led approaches, can be useful for this mind shift, for this paradigm shift that we are talking about. Housing First is not a map, it's a compass. And what do I mean by this? So there are no like step-by-step process that you have to follow and it will work. It's not like that. Housing First works more as a compass because we can see 8 core principles, and obviously housing first means housing on the one side and then support on the other side. But these principles will orientate us in implementing housing first for people. You can see the principles on the screen. Housing is a human right. I saw there was this question. I think it's already answered. Why separation of housing services from social work is important? Well, the thing is, as I'm saying in this presentation, and it's one of the core principles, housing is a human right. So with this approach, with this right to housing approach, everyone deserves a home, an adequate home as well. But then we have these other principles, choice and control for service users. This is a very, very important principle that guides us when we implement housing first programs. Separation of housing and treatment, recovery orientation, harm reduction, active engagement, and person-centered planning. Flexible support for as long as is required. So I think this idea is important when these several countries that are on the feasibility studies and taking into consideration all the recommendations that Nóra and Balázs explained just before my presentation. I think it's important to consider all these principles and consider where we are going, but somehow it could be different in every country. Of course, the contexts are different, and we cannot expect to follow the same path that other countries have, because as you can saw in these presentations, obviously these contexts is a little bit different. This is one of the sentences I like the most when I talk about housing first. It is that there's no housing first without housing first. And to me, when I read the feasibility study, I realized, and I could see, and obviously the presentation before also talked about it as well. We have a lack of housing. Not only in Central and Eastern Europe, but also in the whole continent. And this is very important. I think there is a key role for national governments to create more housing and to create more social housing. And also, I think this is the time for partnership and networks. I mean, we have a very good example, for example, in Spain, with this partnership between Hogarcí and Provivienda, in terms of being two organizations that join efforts. Provivienda provides housing support, and Hogarcí provides support services for housing first participants, and it's a way to unlock housing as well for these housing first programs. I'm going to share with you in the chat a document we produced in this year about unlocking housing for housing first. You can find there some examples in different countries, and as I said before, you cannot take it, okay, let's just take this project and implement it in my city, because it might not work. But I invite you to go through this document, because you might find some inspiration and understand how the dynamics and how to influence policymakers, and how we can find more housing through innovative ways. Also, I think there are a lot of, or there is a lot of room for improvement in terms of collaborating with the private rented sector. Might be a good way to start when, and in those contexts where the governments are not very keen to invest on these housing-led approaches. But anyway, I'll let you go through this document because I'm sure that will be very useful for you. And also, talking about governments, and when Ella contacted me to talk in this webinar and talk about housing-led approaches in Europe, well, we always think about how Finland started to decrease numbers. I think in the last report by Fianza and Fondation Abbé Pierre, only Finland and Denmark were able to decrease the homelessness numbers. And how Finland did that? Well, it's a complex explanation, but I think there are two keys for understanding that. One of them is that they actually made housing first as a policy in their national strategy, and also in terms of housing, that I think today is the main concern. In terms of housing, when this new, how can I say this? So when the state builds or someone social housing, they have to reserve a small percentage for housing first programs. So this is a way to fund in a permanent way these housing first projects, and you will not have to face this funding issue every year or every few years. So I'm gonna talk about now a little bit about the housing first hub. It will be very brief. I think I have only 3 minutes, so it will be quick. So many of you, I'm sure many of you already know the Housing First Europe Hub. We are a partnership of housing organizations, governments, national platforms, cities, ministries, a bunch of experts working together to promote the scaling up of housing first, an effective systemic response to homelessness across Europe. Actually, scaling up is the main issue now, is the main challenge now, because housing first has been proved that it works through a lot of pilot projects, but it's still not the main homelessness policy across Europe. And one thing is clear. I think we don't need more temporary accommodation. We need to start thinking of eradicating homelessness rather than managing homelessness. I think that's the main lesson we learned from the last years. We provide training. Well, as I mentioned before, we are a partnership network, so we are all the time connecting organizations and people. We do research, and we have communities of practice, frontline workers and housing first managers, housing first for youth, national and regional housing first networks, and we have a pool of hub trainers as well if you need some training. I think this is it for now, but I'm really open and keen to receive some questions and try to answer. Thank you.
We're honored that we saw in the chat a lot of people joined in from Croatia, from Slovenia. We saw people from India, maybe we never met. So this is a beautiful opportunity for us to meet new people and share experiences. So actually, question was how Croatia moved to a housing-led approach and how that happened for us. So I'm going to talk in the name of Croatian Homeless Network and the city of Pula, where we both live. So Croatia Homeless Network joined World Habitat which was, in our opinion, a major shift in what happened for us in not a long period. Actually happened in 2 or 3 years that we've been cooperating. So World Habitat is something that is pushing boundaries, moving, especially Croatians, to learn and move our viewpoints. With the World Habitat, we met Linda at first. Helena is vice president of Croatian Homeless Network, which was her assignment to start working with World Habitat. After Linda, we met Patrick, we met Ella, we met a lot of people from World Habitat, and this was something that really supported us in actually moving in a housing-led and housing-first approach. So in those 2 years, we got the opportunity with Housing First European Hub. This picture on your right, I guess it's on your right, shows Helena and Jana as first Housing First trainers. We went through a training from a Housing First European Hub that was instrumental in our knowledge, what we learned, who we met, and I guess we are now trained to train other people, but I'm going to talk later about this.
Jana,
yes,
I'm really sorry to interrupt. Could you move your slides down because we're still on your first slide?
Oh, we can see the second slide.
Yeah, we can see it now. Now you're on number 3.
Is that quite? Yeah. Now.
Yep, and you just need to move along as you go.
Okay. Go back and then.
Thank you.
Okay. So we also met key people in our work that we connected with them, and then actually invited from Lisbon Crescer, NGO Crescer, and presented their work in our municipality office, met our mayor, met our key people in our municipality. That was something that was a start of our housing first, housing led approach in the city of Pula. Croatia is still on a staircase model. That what we learned actually, that we have a person that is experiencing homelessness. We have emergency shelters like overnight shelter or 6 months to a year shelter. We put person in a shelter, do everything that we can to help them, but then we don't have a long-term solution for them. In Croatia is actually only institutions for long-term for people that have a mental illness, and then maybe homes for elderly, and list for waiting is really long. So we definitely needed a change. I'm going to speak in a name of Pula city, because in that time when we met with World Habitat, something was really big happening in our city of Pula, which is by the shore. We have a big shipyard that used to provide a lot of work for a lot of families in Pula, and a shipyard owned 2 huge buildings. I hope you can see the buildings on the right. But at the time, shipyard went bankrupt, and the buildings, both buildings with 100 rooms, were sold to a private owner. Private owner definitely said, okay, I need these people out by May. And the city had a huge problem with over 100 people that used to live. People that used to live in a building are workers, but this was our way of, when somebody would get in a shelter, we both work in a shelter. This building was something that was a long term for a person. They didn't have a support. They just went in the cheapest room in the city. Now the city had a huge problem. They managed that. They owned a private rent building. outside of the city. It's like a 4 kilometers outside of the city, and put 20 people together in the building. Rooms are in one room. They put 2 people that didn't know each other. Actually, what happened, time showed us that this model doesn't work, because a lot of people left, and they're probably over in the shelter or probably back in the streets. So Pula had at that time political shift. Our head of the social department said, this is Ivana, head of the social department, had a long experience working in our psychiatry hospital, and had a lot of feeling of what was going on, and that we needed a change. So everybody from the city decided that it is the best for us to get together, and NGOs like Red Cross, our Institute NGO, municipality, Istrian region, everybody that is working on a field of homelessness had a feeling of, we got to sit together, and everybody were open that we needed some kind of change. So next slide shows teamwork, which is something that happened in Pula, and we think it's a major in ending homelessness, where we had a really good talks and really good conversations on what can we do in our community. That means that we didn't fight over I don't know, money or whatever. We actually decided, okay, this NGO will now do the night shelter and the living room, we call it in Croatia, and then this other NGO, and everybody agreed. So I think that the common thing that we have in Croatia with the homeless network, having a lot of partners, NGOs from Croatia, this teamwork is really great right now. And I think we should all be example to other countries and to other cities in Croatia, that teamwork is something that is necessary for us to be better and to erase homelessness. So how we actually, once we had a meeting, and once we put this in a media, had a housing first trainers that are not trained in a Balkan region. That was something that was really good for us, having a knowledge that nobody has in the region except Slovenians. They have a really good program. We realized it is time to promote. Once it gets out in the media, and once you find news reporters that have this sense of social injustice, and they're empathetic, avalanche of videos, reporters, news started to flood the Pula. World Habitat also helped us with that. So we were out there, and everybody wanted to know. So I wrote down, we got invited to speak at the social work convention. We did a lot of interviews with what is a housing-led approach. We did a lot of healthy cities. We also wrote conferences. We also wrote articles for a few organizations, which means that we actually have a really good start on what can we do, and what are we doing right now. And our future steps, there's a lot of steps. We have a lot of work, but kind of like a good energy and always a good laugh. It gets us on. So train the trainer housing first. Now we have opportunity to train other people in Croatia. So we are going to start with Croatian Homeless Network, and try to give the explanation of what is housing first to our colleagues that work with our clients. Also, Ministry of Labor asked us if we can do the training for them, so that's in our plan. Feasibility study Pula is that something that we learned from World Habitat. Okay, it's going to be a Central and Eastern Europe, and the city had a really good sense of like, okay, we can do ours and be the first city to help other cities on how to do. So right now, Nóra from Hungary that was speaking earlier, she's working with us, and all of the Hungarians are working with us on to get proposals what the city can do better. So we are actually really excited, and we are all going to call you for our launching of our feasibility study in Pula. In the meantime, we got the project from a 3-year project from Ministry of Labor and Social Work. So now Pula is starting the first pilot project in Croatia, in our city of Pula. We get the 1 apartment. So there is a lot of work, but there is a lot of space to be better, and especially with the whole community working together and internationally helping us get new knowledges, because in Croatia it used to be that we are still on this kind of like hello, our internet is not working. No, I'm just joking, but actually this is our story. You can contact us if that can help somebody in how great teamwork, international teamwork works. And okay. And what about me? Actually, Red Cross, we work under Red Cross right now, and the whole community said, okay, we need an NGO that will do housing first. So we opened a new NGO. It's called What About Me? What about all of us? How can we eradicate homelessness? Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Helena. Thank you, Jana. Yeah, really, really inspirational presentation. And yeah, fantastic to kind of hear again about all the amazing progress that you've made and will continue to make.
Generally, the challenges facing Romania in implementing a housing-led approach to homelessness is a very small stock of social housing, as Nóra explained, the lack of real investment in the sector, and the weak capacity of local governments to develop and manage social housing programs. Moreover, there is often a lack of coordination between central and local governments on social housing policy. It must also be remembered that people experiencing homelessness in Romania often face discrimination from landlords, employers, and society in general, which creates huge barriers to them getting back on their feet. I want to go on a little bit more detail regarding the background and what the government's response to the issue is first, before we talk about how Castellana has taken the approach. The housing situation in Romania is complex and faces a number of challenges. Romania has the highest home ownership rate in the EU, with 96.4% of Romanians living in their own homes. In major urban areas, this is due mainly to the government implementing a number of policies that promoted home ownership, such as the privatization of housing units at low prices in the 90s, and then tax breaks for homeowners and subsidized mortgage loans. Much of Romania's housing stock, however, is old and in poor condition, with 35% of the stock in a state of complete neglect and in need of urgent repairs. Housing prices have been rising in recent years, especially in important cities, due to the influx of foreign investment, a growing middle class, and a limited supply of land. The rental market is very small, with only 1.3% of the population living in rented accommodation. Airbnb has driven up rents in popular tourist destinations. Landlords obtain more for short-term rentals than they do for long-term lets. This makes it difficult for people to find affordable housing, especially in areas with a high concentration of Airbnb listings. The exact number of social housing units in Romania is not known, as there is no central registry of social housing units. According to the Romanian Ministry of Development, there are an estimated 1.5 million social housing units across the country, meaning that 2% of the total housing stock is social.
Ian, I'm sorry to interrupt. We can't see your presentation.
Can you see it now?
No. Shall I share it on my screen?
Please, if you would.
Yep, no problem.
So we should be on slide 3.
Everyone see that okay? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we're on slide 3. Yep. Okay. The Romanian government provides a number of programs to help low-income households meet their housing needs. These programs include social housing to be provided to low-income households who cannot afford to rent or buy a home on the open market. According to a 2020 report by the European Committee of Social Rights, the average waiting time for social housing in Romania is 10 years. However, in some areas, the waiting time can be much longer. For example, in Bucharest, the waiting time is estimated to be 20 years. Housing allowances exist to help low-income families with the cost of rent or mortgage payments, yet many who are eligible for housing allowances are not aware of the program or how to apply. The admissibility criteria is complex and the process bureaucratic. Home improvement grants are, in general, more difficult to obtain than a housing allowance. This is because home improvement grants are typically funded by a combination of government and private sources, and there's often more competition for these funds. The Mortgage Guarantee Programme is designed to help people with a good credit history and a stable income. Low-income people are not likely to qualify. Getting microcredit as a low-income person can be difficult but not impossible. However, the admissibility criteria can be strict and interest rates high. Next slide. Next slide, please. Can we move to slide 4?
We've got Casa Ioana's approach.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, sorry. Fine. Casa Ioana recognizes that social exclusion has complex and multidimensional causes and consequences. This involves an individual's problems combined over time to create a vicious circle which is difficult to overcome. Consequently, Casa Ioana's approach to homelessness shifted from simply offering night shelter support to developing a program where accommodation and wide-ranging services are central to empowering people to make a positive move on with their lives. Casa Ioana's Family Centre offers a very good standard of accommodation. I think we need to be on it. Sorry, I'm seeing a different screen to you. Okay. 1 second. Okay. Casa Ioana's Family Centre offers a very good standard of accommodation, which includes a shared kitchen, dining and living areas, bathrooms and toilets, private family rooms, and children's play areas. Professionally qualified psychosocial support staff build a working relationship with clients to enable a smooth transition and to ensure that practical and emotional support, advice and guidance is provided to the highest standard. Clients come and go as they please and are responsible for looking after their own rooms and the general areas. The centre supports up to 10 families at any one time. The key aim of this support is to empower clients through a wide range of assistance, including housing rights and responsibilities, social benefits, accessing services in the local community, training on life skills development, preparing and maintaining a rent, training on interpersonal skills in the workplace, building self-confidence and social skills, and budgeting bill payments and personal management. Casa Ioana recognizes that clients are individuals with differing, although often similar needs. Some clients may need longer to get back onto their feet than others. So Casa Ioana provides clients with accommodation and services for up to a year if necessary. Where clients need ongoing support in relation to longer-term issues in relation to accommodation, Castellana refers them to a network of other organisations that can better meet those needs. Next slide, please. A family that has become settled, i.e. their psychosocial needs have been met, the parent is in formal employment, and the children are in full-time education if applicable, it's time to prepare the family to find a place to live. A key element in the programme is for clients to be supported in finding a job soon after entering Castellana. This enables clients to establish a savings plan during their stay so that they have the money to pay a rent deposit and up to 3 months rent in advance when they have found a place to live. Clients are encouraged and supported to find a suitable furnished home in the private rental sector and to secure a formal rental agreement. The client's social worker is actively involved in this process and can also help to assure for the trustworthiness of the client and offer to mediate where there are disputes. Not all clients leaving Castellana need extra support, but client support continues for as long as it's needed. Next slide. To finish, Castellana recognises that housing-led approaches to homelessness work because they are based on the principle that housing is a foundation for addressing other issues such as poverty, mental health and substance abuse. Because of the major changes in implementing a housing-led programme in Romania at the present time, Castellana took the pragmatic step of providing temporary accommodation until a family finds stable housing in the private rented sector. During this transition, clients receive the support they need, which continues where necessary, even after they leave Castellana. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so just a few information about where Košice, our home city is. It is in eastern Slovakia. It is the second city in Slovakia with 240,000 citizens. It is a very multinational, industrial and creative city. But it is also a city in transition, but with growing disparities. And this is where we operate. And we also operate in the third city, which is Prešov, also in eastern Slovakia, the twin city of Košice. And the situation of homelessness is very specific there with a high number of homeless families. Just a short information about the housing market here. Housing in Slovakia is not affordable and similar to other countries about which we are talking today, only 1.6% of the housing market is a social rental housing. In my city, it means that out of 97,000 apartments, only 1,500 are social houses, social apartments, and only 500 are dedicated to people who are at risk of homelessness. So imagine the number of apartments in general and number of social rental apartments, such a disparity. This is similar to other countries in Central and Eastern Europe, also a result of a huge privatization in the 90s and the beginning of 2000s. So that's the housing market. And short information about Foundation Dedo. We have 26 years of experience. We originally started as an organization which has been focusing on crisis intervention, meaning we first started to build shelters for families just to prevent separation of children from their parents and to prevent institutional care. But during our period of time, we moved to focusing on preventing homelessness and ending homelessness. Currently, we have two main programs, and I'm going to talk today only about a program, Housing with Support, where we apply housing first approach. But our organization is also very much involved in programs focusing on employment of people with the experience of homelessness, and we've spent a lot of time within advocacy and communication activities. So that's what we do. And when we started to think about applying housing first approach in Košice, we found out that we have no data available. And to overcome this, we organized a registry week in 2021, which was a whole week activity. It was a point in time research performed by 100 volunteers. More than 20 organizations were involved, and we spent the whole week talking with homeless families, and we found out that there were at least 310 families who were homeless at that time, and in Košice that we had at least 748 children, which is new information for us, because officially in our country there was no child homeless in Slovakia. So this was the first evidence we got. These families mostly live in shelters or encampments or informal settlements, and this is how it looks. These are the housing conditions of almost 200 families in our city. What we also found out that these families are very young, mostly with very young parents who very often don't have jobs. But there is one more striking point and information that we have about 12% of the families are those where there is the second generation of kids growing up in homelessness, meaning that these children are being born into homelessness in EU country. This is a map which just gives an overview of where informal settlements and encampments are. As you can see, these are mostly on the outskirts of the city and industrial zones. And I would say that in about 4 of those settlements, there are more than 40 families. Like, it is a huge population of people who live without access to drinking water and electricity and other necessities. This was the first and very important information we got about the families, and the very important reasons why we also performed this registry week was that we wanted to have a understanding of the history of homelessness of those families, their structure, number of members, health conditions, and other things, so we can design a program that would be able to address those needs. Very important information we found only a few months ago is that homelessness is a much deeper and more significant issue in our city. Based on the official census performed by the national government in 2021, we had 5,019 people who lived in situation of secondary homelessness in 2021. And with the approximate number of people who might not be captured by this census, we think that there are about 6,000 people who experience homelessness and housing exclusion in the city. This means that the situation is very, very striking and challenging. So what we started to do to address this situation, and we started to do this 3 years ago, is that we focused on introducing the housing first approach. As my colleagues mentioned previously, also in Slovakia, we have this staircase model, which can also be called a housing ready model. And we know from the experience, but also from the European data that or international data, that only 20 to 40% of people are able to get to affordable housing in the existing system. So we wanted to pilot the housing first approach so we could have data and experience on how this innovation can work in our setting. So what we do is that we provide families who are currently homeless with affordable rental apartment, and we also provide them with support services in their homes. We are very much focused on separating the housing from the support, because this means that the families have their separate rental contract with they have to behave based on, and it also means that in case that they don't need support services, they can still sustain their housing, and vice versa. if they cannot sustain their housing, they will still have our support of the support team, and we try to house them again and again. What the result of such an approach and system is that the health of and feeling of safety increases in case of these families who are housed, and the stability and well-being as well. And we of course tackle the stigma of homelessness. I'm not going to share more about the Housing First core principles because Arturo already mentioned that. But anytime we have troubles in our programs, we have to go back to the principles because we probably don't follow them. So the fidelity to those principles is extremely important. And I'm happy also to be one of the people who are currently being trained as a Housing First trainer. I will be able, and hopefully other people in Slovakia soon, to train other practitioners and providers, so this Housing First approach can be scaled up. Just short information about our goals. Our goal is to decrease family homelessness in Košice by housing 40 families in total by the end of this year. And here I want to share our experience with the cooperation with the municipality. And this partnership was instrumental in this process. Municipality rented to us 14 municipal apartments, which was initially a very strong help how we could start the piloting of the Housing First approach. The municipality renovated those apartments. All of the apartments are scattered around the city, and it helped us to start the Housing First program. Currently, we mostly operate as a social rental agency, and this is how we try to find apartments on the open market. We have a separate team of people who are providers, social workers, psychologists. We have also the legal advisor and nurse and peer workers in our team who help families to sustain their homes. Our goal is also to achieve that Housing First will become and will be a primary approach to end homelessness in local and national strategies. And this is also one of the things which is very important. And currently in Slovakia, we are ongoing the process of the preparation of the action plan to prevent and end homelessness. This action plan is being prepared for next 3 years. And we've been lucky that this year in spring, the national strategy on preventing and ending of homelessness has been approved. So we currently have the basis for our work across Slovakia. The ethos definition has been adopted for this strategy, and currently we are working mostly on the activities which will be focusing on how to improve the legislation and how to prepare funding for scaling up the housing-led approaches in the country. And our goal is also to end chronic homelessness in Košice by 2030. That's it. These are our project partners, and you can see many of them are representing municipality or regional government or the national government. But I would like also to share how mentoring from Platform for Social Housing in Czech Republic has been instrumental in our work, and everything what we've been doing since 2018 was thanks to their mentorship and their help. Platform for Social Housing is an umbrella organization in Czech Republic, and they are very active in scaling up the Housing First approach in Czech Republic, and they're working with more than 20 municipalities across Czech Republic, where they try to create integrated systems that would end homelessness in these cities. So this is something. This last slide, what we would like to get to, building an integrated municipal systems that would be able to end homelessness. And these are the parts which we will need real data in real time, united navigation in the integrated system, prevention of loss of housing, and integrated resources of support and housing. And we are working in our city and in Slovakia to get there, to have such models and to implement them, so we can start to work on ending of homelessness in our cities and country. Thank you very much.
Habitat for organizing this interesting event, and also to congratulate my colleagues in the region for their important work. I was asked to briefly describe the strategic approach to homelessness that the municipality of Budapest took by preparing and then ratifying a new strategy, a 10-year strategy on homelessness last year. And then I will also comment a little bit about our collaboration with From Streets to Homes Association, which is a major partner of World Habitat from Hungary. So the basic policy premise, basic policy principle of the strategy that the municipality of Budapest prepared last year is that homelessness policy is not and should not be about shelters and outreach, that homelessness as a policy issue and as a social problem should essentially be liberated from the understanding, or more accurately, the misunderstanding that it is about the availability and number of shelter beds. And instead, we should focus more on the real issue, which is the lack of affordable housing. So defining homelessness as a lack of housing is not at all a consensual. It's more a controversial statement in the Hungarian context, but that is the fundamental policy principle or sociological principle that the strategy is based on. And as I mentioned, its main effort essentially is to argue that instead of exclusively focusing on emergency responses to homelessness, more attention and more importantly, much more resources should be dedicated to the promotion of exiting homelessness through increasing access to affordable housing, and equally important is strengthening prevention, which really is self-evident that if you want to decrease homelessness, you need to ensure that at any given time more people are able to exit homelessness than the number of people who are becoming homelessness. It's really this simple, but given the entrenched and institutionalized misunderstanding of the past 30 decades, which really was mostly about the provision of dormitory-style shelters and daytime centers and so on, you really need to stress and provide the empirical foundations for these otherwise self-evident sociological truths. So in this respect, our strategy is within a much broader effort to reframe homelessness, as Nóra mentioned, to shift the narratives about homelessness. And whereas in some countries, academic research with very rigorous methodology, especially concerning the Housing First program in the United States, was a major ally for these policy efforts. In Hungary, this is not so much the case. Research is quite undeveloped in this respect, and this housing turn essentially was prepared more on the streets by community organizations and activism, as well as From Streets to Homes associations with their groundworking program to provide affordable and secure housing for homeless people and people living in self-built shacks in the forest and informal settlements and so on. We applied three basic principles of strategy making from the start. The first was evidence-based social policy making, given that in order to challenge the path dependencies and entrenched misunderstandings about homelessness, you really need to, I suppose, gather as legitimacy as you can. And so the strategy making process started with gathering all the available and even like hardly available, but still available data on homelessness. And it also included some explanatory research to cover those areas which there were no available data so far. Equally important was to ensure the participation of homeless citizens. We organized 14 forums through which we reached over 200 people with an experience in homelessness. These forums were organized in daytime centers, overnight shelters, temporary homes for families. There was also a forum specifically for ex-homeless people who the municipality of Budapest has already provided affordable housing. Whereas these forums were capable of reaching a relatively large number of homeless people, they didn't provide the opportunity for a more in-depth engagement. And in order to ensure that as well, we organized a council of experts by experience to which people with homelessness experience could apply. And the selection process aimed at ensuring more or less the representativity of the participants in terms of age and educational attainment and so on. And those homeless people were able to work together with us in a longer, more in-depth way through workshops. And finally, we also organized several practitioner consultations so that those social workers and other social care professionals who currently work in overnight shelters and daytime centers and in outreach efforts, family hostels and so on, could channel in all their recommendations and experiences and grievances and so on. The strategy identified four basic goals, which shouldn't really come as a surprise. I suppose the first is the strengthening of prevention. The second is increasing access to affordable housing. The third was to decrease rough sleeping or unsheltered homelessness, which is not compatible with dignity, and which is also very harmful in terms of the health and life expectancy and everything of those concerned. And the fourth main goal identified in the strategy was to enhance the quality of the available shelters by the provision of less crowded shelters, shelters that provide more privacy, shelters that provide more human conditions and so on, which is of course also a precondition for decreasing unsheltered homelessness. Now, given the financial constraints of the municipality of Budapest, the extent to which the municipality will be able to go forward with these goals in the forthcoming years is to a significant degree dependent on the availability of EU funds, which is currently not yet secured because of the debate between the Hungarian central government and the European Commission. But as far as the municipality of Budapest is concerned, we did include relatively extensive and well-resourced programs in the relevant planning documents in order to be able to start a quite extensive housing allowance or rent voucher program for people currently living in homelessness, and to be able to initiate and then scale up a housing agency which would extend the supply of affordable rentals, both through the renovation of vacant public housing, the repurposing of unused non-residential public buildings, and the inclusion of private rentals or privately owned housing units to the supply of affordable rentals. Now, as far as our cooperation with NGOs is concerned, the municipality of Budapest is cooperating with a variety of NGOs active in the homelessness field. And one of these organizations is from Streets to Homes Association, which is, I mentioned, an important partner of World Habitat in Hungary. Actually, together with the Metropolitan Research Institute, from whom Nóra was speaking earlier, from Streets to Home Association was a partner in a European Social Catalyst Fund project. from the past years, which compiled the detailed policy proposal for the introduction and implementation of a citywide housing agency scheme. We have an ongoing cooperation with the association in a program funded by the European Urban Initiative Innovative Actions program called Affordable Housing for All Budapest, which includes some investments in terms of a replicable model of the repurposing of unused non-residential public buildings for social housing, but it also includes an early warning system concerning areas and other housing problems, and some more experimental side projects of the housing agency scheme to promote flexible housing arrangements for specific target groups. And finally, I should also mention that there's a small-scale mobile house program that the Municipality of Budapest is trying to cooperate with the association about, which is really about the use of vacant municipality-owned lots for the development of low-cost but high-quality affordable rental units for homeless households, which unfortunately suffered some backlashes about not in my backyard type of political mobilization, but we are still hopeful that we will be able to proceed with the project in the forthcoming years. So my time is up. Thank you very much for your attention. And if there's any question or comments, I'm also available after the webinar in these addresses and phone numbers.
Thank you, Balázs. Yeah, really interesting presentation. It's great to hear from a progressive municipality that's really trying some really innovative programs and working with some fantastic partners. So yeah, thank you very much for your time. We are 5 minutes over. I think, as I said, there was so much kind of good practice to fit into today. Hopefully that has given you a taste of some of the work that's happening in the region. Thank you very much to all of our speakers today, and in particular to our brilliant researchers who have worked on this study. You'll be able to find the study, the executive summary, and the policy briefings online. We've shared the link to that already. This for World Habitat really is the start of a conversation. So the next steps for us are to run in-country online policy roundtable events, so one for each of the 4 focus countries, and we've shared in the chat again my email address if you are interested in coming along to those. So they're really an opportunity to take a deeper dive into some of the recommendations from the study, and to think about the potential challenges and advantages of related to transitioning to a housing-led approach. So yeah, if you're interested, please do come along. Please do let me know that you'd be keen to come along. And we're really keen to hear from you, really. If you're working in the region, if you're delivering or thinking about delivering a housing-led approach, please do get in touch with us. Yeah, this is sort of the beginning of a wider piece of work, so which is really exciting. So that's it from us, and so all that remains really is to say thank you again to all of our speakers and to everybody that's participated in the chat and the Q&A, and have a very lovely Monday. And yeah, take care. Thanks, everyone.